Vernon and Ray Dean had been friends for 40 years. They'd driven trucks together in their 20s, raised families on the same block, buried their wives within 2 years of each other. So when Ray Dean said he wanted to open a bakery, his lifelong dream, Vernon didn't hesitate. He sold his rig. He put in Darlene's life insurance money, $160,000, everything he had. The deal was simple, 50-50 ownership. Ray Dean runs it, Vernon stays silent. For 5 years, small checks arrived every month. For 5 years, Vernon trusted his best friend completely. He had no idea Ray Dean had opened a second location. No idea his name had been removed from every legal document. No idea that Ray Dean was about to sell both bakeries and vanish until his granddaughter found the truth buried in a stack of business records. Celia wasn't looking for anything wrong. She was studying for her CPA exam and needed practice with real business documents. When she asked her grandfather if she could look at his bakery investment, Vernon laughed. He told her there wasn't much to see. Just a single-page agreement and some monthly deposit records. But Celia wanted the practice, so he gave her the name of the bakery and told her to pull whatever public records she could find. She started on a Tuesday night after work. Business filings, tax records, licensing documents, standard stuff. Within an hour, she found something strange. There were 2 locations listed under Ray Dean's name. The original bakery, the one Vernon had invested in, and a second shop in a town 40 minutes away. That second location had been open for 3 years. Vernon had never mentioned it. Celia figured maybe he just forgot, or maybe he didn't think it was important. Then she pulled the ownership records. The original bakery listed Ray Dean Howell as sole proprietor. No partners, no investors. Vernon's name wasn't anywhere. Celia checked twice. She checked a third time. His name was gone. She requested copies of every filed document from the county clerk. When the packet arrived, she spread it across her kitchen table and went through it, page by page. The operating agreement for the original bakery had Ray Dean's signature at the bottom. It also had Vernon's signature. But Celia knew her grandfather's handwriting. She'd seen it on birthday cards and Christmas checks her whole life. The signature on that document wasn't his. Someone had forged it. She found 3 more forged signatures across different filings, all of them dated within the past 2 years. All of them written in a hand that looked close to Vernon's but wasn't quite right. The loops were too smooth, the slant was off. Whoever did this had tried to copy his writing and almost pulled it off. Almost. Celia sat at her table for a long time. She thought about calling her grandfather right then. But this wasn't something you said over the phone. This was $160,000. This was his retirement. This was the money from selling his rig and everything left from her grandmother's life insurance. She couldn't just call him and say, "Your best friend robbed you." She left work early the next day without telling anyone why. The drive to Vernon's house took 2 hours. Somewhere around the halfway point, she had to pull over because she couldn't see the road through her tears. She sat on the shoulder for 10 minutes, trying to figure out what she was going to say. How do you tell a 73-year-old man that the person he trusted most in the world had been stealing from him for years? How do you explain that his name had been erased from something he built? She didn't have answers. She just had a folder full of documents and a sick feeling that wouldn't go away. When she pulled into Vernon's driveway, he was sitting on the front porch. He waved when he saw her car. He looked happy, surprised. He wasn't expecting her. Celia grabbed the folder from the passenger seat and walked toward the porch. Vernon stood up, still smiling, and asked what brought her all the way out here. Celia didn't smile back. She held up the folder and said they needed to talk inside. The look on her face made Vernon stop smiling too. Vernon's kitchen table had seen a lot over the years. Holiday dinners, bill payments, the paperwork when Darlene got sick. Now it was covered with documents that proved his best friend had been lying to him for years. Celia laid everything out. The second location Vernon had never heard of. The ownership records with his name erased. The operating agreement with a signature that looked like his but wasn't. 3 more forgeries across different filings, all dated within the past 2 years. Piece by piece, she showed him how Ray Dean had cut him out. Vernon didn't say anything. He just looked. She put the forged operating agreement beside the original agreement Vernon had kept in his filing cabinet since the day he signed it. The two documents should have matched. They didn't. The original had Vernon's real signature. The filed version had something close to his signature, but not quite right. Someone had traced it, copied it, forged it. Vernon picked up his original agreement, the one he'd signed 5 years ago at Ray Dean's kitchen table. They'd shared a bottle of whiskey that night. Ray Dean had talked about how much this meant to him, how he'd dreamed of owning a bakery since he was a kid watching his mother bake, how Vernon was the only person who believed in him enough to put up the money. Vernon had felt good that night, proud to help his friend. He held the paper for a long time. Celia waited. She didn't push. She'd said everything she needed to say. The documents told the story. Ray Dean had been skimming profits for years. He'd opened a second location and kept all the revenue. He'd systematically erased Vernon from the business they'd built together. And based on what Celia found in the recent filings, he was preparing to sell both locations. The whole thing. Every oven and mixing bowl that Vernon's money had paid for. Vernon set the agreement down. He looked at his granddaughter. His voice was steady when he spoke. "You're sure about this?" Celia nodded. She was sure. She'd checked everything 3 times. She'd verified the signatures with a handwriting comparison guide. She'd traced the money through the business accounts as far as public records would let her. There was no mistake, no misunderstanding. Ray Dean had stolen from him. Vernon looked at the papers spread across the table. 5 years of trust. 40 years of friendship. $160,000. Everything he had left after selling his rig and burying his wife. All of it given freely to a man he thought he knew. He nodded once. Just once. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam his fist on the table. He didn't cry. He just sat there, quiet, and something shifted behind his eyes. Celia had never seen that look on her grandfather's face before. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something colder, something that had made a decision and wasn't going to unmake it. Vernon stood up from the table. He thanked Celia for driving all this way. He told her to get some rest in the guest room. Then he said he needed to take a drive in the morning. He didn't say where. He didn't have to. Vernon left the house at 7 the next morning. He didn't wake Celia. He didn't leave a note. He just got in his truck and drove the 45 minutes to the bakery he'd paid for 5 years ago. The parking lot was half full when he arrived. Morning rush, regulars getting coffee and pastries before work. Vernon sat in his truck for a few minutes, watching people come and go through the front door. He'd been here dozens of times over the years, stopped in to say hello, grabbed a cup of coffee, told Ray Dean how proud he was of what they'd built together. Every one of those visits had been a lie. Ray Dean had smiled at him and taken his money and planned to cut him out the whole time. Vernon got out of the truck and walked inside. The bakery smelled like fresh bread and cinnamon. Display cases lined with pastries. A chalkboard menu on the wall. Everything clean, everything running smooth. Vernon's money had built this. His savings, his wife's life insurance, every dollar he had left after 40 years on the road. Ray Dean was behind the counter, talking to a customer. He looked up when Vernon walked in. His face lit up with that familiar smile. The one Vernon had trusted for 4 decades. "Vernon! Wasn't expecting you today!" Vernon didn't smile back. He waited by the door while Ray Dean finished with the customer. A woman paid for a box of muffins. A man ordered coffee. Ray Dean chatted with each of them like he had all the time in the world. Vernon waited. He wasn't in a rush. When the last customer stepped aside, Vernon walked up to the counter. Ray Dean was still smiling, still acting like nothing was wrong. Like this was just another friendly visit from his old partner. Vernon kept his voice low. He didn't want to make a scene. Not yet. He told Ray Dean that he knew about the second location, the one in Martindale that had been open for 3 years. He told him that he'd seen the ownership records. His name wasn't on them anymore. He told him about the forged signatures, 3 of them across different filings, all dated within the past 2 years. Ray Dean's smile flickered, just for a second. Then it came back, but different now, tighter. Vernon told him that he knew about the sale, that Ray Dean was planning to sell both locations and walk away with everything. Every dollar Vernon had put in, every cent of profit from 5 years of business. gone. He gave Ray Dean a chance. He said they could fix this. Ray Dean could restore his ownership, pay him what he was owed, and they could walk away without lawyers, without courts, without the whole town knowing what Ray Dean had done to his best friend. Ray Dean wiped his hands on his apron. He shook his head slowly, like Vernon was a child who'd gotten confused about something simple. "Vernon, come on," he said. "I don't know what you think you found, but you're not remembering things clearly. We settled all that paperwork years ago. Maybe you're just getting mixed up." Vernon looked at the man he'd known for 40 years, the man he'd trusted with everything, and Ray Dean looked back at him like he was senile, like he was some doddering old fool who couldn't tell reality from imagination. Vernon didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't try to convince Ray Dean of anything. There was nothing left to say. He turned around and walked out of the bakery. Ray Dean called after him. Said they should grab lunch sometime and talk it through. Said there was no reason to get worked up over a misunderstanding. Vernon didn't look back. He got in his truck and drove home. The smell of fresh bread followed him out the door. He knew he'd never be able to smell it again without thinking of this moment. Ray Dean watched him go. He was still smiling. He thought he'd won. He had no idea what was coming. Celia was waiting on the porch when Vernon got back. She'd made coffee. She didn't ask how it went. She could see the answer on his face. They sat at the kitchen table again, same papers spread out. Same evidence of 5 years of lies. Vernon told her what happened. The second location, the forged signatures, the sale. He'd laid it all out for Ray Dean, given him a chance to make it right. Celia asked what Ray Dean said. Vernon told her, the smile, the head shake, the suggestion that Vernon was confused, not remembering clearly, getting mixed up in his old age. Celia's jaw tightened. She'd seen her grandfather fix truck engines from memory. She'd watched him do math in his head faster than she could punch numbers into a calculator. The idea that anyone would call him confused made her want to drive back to that bakery herself. She asked Vernon what he wanted to do now. Vernon looked at the papers on the table. 40 years of friendship, $160,000. A man who'd looked him in the eye and called him senile. Everything, Vernon said. They started that afternoon. Celia knew a lawyer from her firm who handled fraud cases. She made a call. By the end of the week, Vernon had hired an attorney named Ruth Barlow. She was in her 50s, no nonsense, and she'd spent 20 years going after people who thought they could cheat their way to money. She looked at Celia's documentation and told Vernon he had a strong case. Fraud, breach of contract, damages she could file within 10 days. Vernon told her to file. Over the next week, Celia filed complaints with the State Attorney General, the Business Licensing Board, and the IRS. Fraud, forgery, tax evasion. She documented everything. The original agreement, the altered filings, the hidden income from the second location. Every lie Ray Dean had told, she put on paper. Vernon signed every document Celia put in front of him. He didn't hesitate. He didn't ask for more time to think it over. He'd given Ray Dean 40 years of trust and one chance to make it right. Ray Dean had laughed at him. There was nothing left to consider. On the 5th day, Celia tracked down the buyer Ray Dean had lined up, a restaurant group from out of state looking to expand into the area. She sent them an email with a summary of the situation, forged documents, disputed ownership, pending civil suit, active complaints with the State Attorney General and the IRS. She told them they could verify everything with public records. She suggested they might want to reconsider the purchase until the legal situation was resolved. The buyer's lawyer called back within 2 hours. They had questions. Celia had answers, and Ray Dean had no idea any of this was happening. That night, Vernon sat alone in his living room. The house was quiet. Celia had gone back to her apartment, promising to return the next week when the civil suit was officially filed. Vernon looked around the room. Same furniture he'd had for 30 years. Same photos on the wall. One photo sat on the bookshelf by the window. Vernon and Ray Dean at a truck stop in 1982. Young, grinning. Two guys who thought they'd be friends forever. Vernon picked up the frame. He looked at it for a long time. Then he set it face down on the shelf and turned off the light. 2 weeks after the complaints were filed, Vernon drove back to the bakery, same parking lot, same line of customers waiting for coffee and pastries, but this time Vernon wasn't there to talk to Ray Dean. He was there to talk to everyone else. Vernon walked through the front door at 8:15. The line stretched 6 people deep. Ray Dean was behind the counter with a young woman Vernon didn't recognize. Probably a new hire. Business must have been good. Business Vernon had paid for. Ray Dean saw him come in. His smile dropped for just a second before he forced it back. He said something to the young woman and stepped out from behind the counter. He walked toward Vernon with his hands up, palms out, like he was trying to calm down a stray dog. "Vernon, let's talk in the back. Whatever this is, we can work it out." Vernon didn't move. He didn't lower his voice. He spoke loud enough for everyone in line to hear. 40 years ago, I met this man at a truck stop outside of Memphis. We drove routes together for 15 years. I was at his wedding. He was at my wife's funeral. 5 years ago, I gave him $160,000 to open this bakery. Every dollar I had. My rig, my wife's life insurance, everything. The line had gone quiet. People turned to look. Ray Dean's face went pale. He was supposed to be my partner. 50-50. I have the agreement with both our signatures. But Ray Dean here decided he didn't want a partner anymore. So he forged my signature on new documents. He removed my name from the business. He opened a second location I never knew about and kept all the profits. And last month, he tried to sell both bakeries without giving me a cent. A woman near the front of the line set down the muffin she'd been about to pay for. She looked at Ray Dean, then at Vernon, then back at Ray Dean. Vernon kept going. When I confronted him about it, he told me I was confused. Said I wasn't remembering things clearly. He looked me in the eye and tried to make me think I was losing my mind. After 40 years of friendship, after everything I gave him, Ray Dean stepped forward. "Vernon, this isn't the place. You're embarrassing yourself." "No," Vernon said. "I'm telling the truth, something you haven't done in 5 years." He turned to the people in line, 6 strangers who'd just wanted coffee and a pastry. Now they were witnesses. "I'm not asking you to do anything," Vernon said. "I'm just telling you who you're giving your money to. A man who stole from his best friend and called him senile when he got caught. That's who owns this place. That's who you're supporting every time you walk through that door. Do with that what you want." Vernon turned and walked out. He didn't look at Ray Dean. He didn't wait for a response. He got in his truck and drove home. Behind him, the bakery went quiet. The woman who'd set down her muffin picked up her purse and left without buying anything. 2 more people followed her out. The young woman behind the counter looked at Ray Dean with a question on her face. Ray Dean didn't have an answer. By noon, 3 regular customers had called to cancel their standing orders. A supplier who'd worked with Ray Dean for 4 years called to say they'd need cash on delivery from now on. No more credit, no more net 30 terms, cash only. By the end of the week, the restaurant group from out of state sent a formal letter withdrawing their offer. They cited unresolved legal disputes and concerns about clear title to the business assets. They wished Ray Dean well in his future endeavors. Ray Dean called Vernon twice that week. Vernon didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. The machine was already moving. Vernon had done his part. Now he just had to wait. And Ray Dean was about to learn how patient he could be. Over the next 4 months, every complaint landed. The state attorney general's office confirmed the forgeries. The IRS opened an audit on 3 years of unreported income. The licensing board revoked Ray Dean's business licenses pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. Ray Dean hired a lawyer. Then he hired a second lawyer when the first one saw the evidence and suggested he settle. The legal fees alone ate through his savings. He couldn't sell the bakeries because of the pending civil suit. He couldn't operate them properly because suppliers wanted cash and customers had stopped coming. The lines that used to stretch out the door were down to a handful of people. Most of them didn't know the story yet. The ones who did had stopped coming back. Both bakeries closed within 3 months. Ruth Barlow called Vernon that evening with the news. She told him the civil suit was likely to settle now. Ray Dean had no business left to protect, no income coming in, no leverage. His lawyer had already reached out to discuss terms. 2 weeks later, they reached an agreement. Ray Dean couldn't pay back the full amount. He didn't have it. But the court awarded Vernon ownership of all equipment and inventory from the original bakery location. Ovens, mixers, display cases, tables and chairs. Everything that Vernon's money had paid for in the first place. Vernon hired a company to auction it all off. Took about a month to sell everything. When the final count came in, he'd recovered $63,000, less than half of what he'd put in. But it was something. Celia drove down the weekend after the auction closed. She found Vernon at the kitchen table with a laptop open in front of him. He wasn't good with computers, but he was trying. She asked what he was working on. Vernon turned the screen toward her. It was a website for the community college 2 towns over, their culinary arts program. He'd been looking at how to set up a scholarship fund. Celia sat down next to him. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she asked what he wanted to call it. Vernon had already decided. The Darlene Skaggs Memorial Culinary Scholarship. For students who couldn't afford the program on their own. People who had a dream and just needed someone to believe in them enough to help. Celia helped him fill out the paperwork that afternoon. The $63,000 went into a trust. The interest would fund 1 scholarship a year, maybe 2 in good years. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to matter to someone. When they finished, Vernon closed the laptop and sat back in his chair. He looked tired, not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, the kind that comes from carrying something heavy for a long time and finally setting it down. Celia asked if he was okay. Vernon nodded. He said he was. For the first time in months, he meant it. 6 months passed. Vernon settled into a quiet routine. Morning coffee on the porch. Afternoon walks around the property. Dinner alone most nights, but Celia visited when she could. She passed her CPA exam. Vernon kept the certificate she'd mailed him on the refrigerator door. The scholarship fund awarded its first recipient in the spring. A young woman named Tamara who worked 2 jobs and dreamed of opening her own restaurant someday. Vernon didn't go to the ceremony. He didn't need the recognition. He just needed to know it was happening, that something good had come from all of it. He didn't think about Ray Dean much anymore. The anger had faded, not into forgiveness, just into distance. Ray Dean was part of his past now. A closed chapter. A lesson learned too late. Then the phone rang. Vernon was sitting on the porch when he saw the number. He recognized it. He'd known that number for 40 years. He almost didn't answer, almost let it ring through to nothing. But something made him pick up. Ray Dean's voice sounded different, smaller. The confidence was gone. The charm was gone. He said he'd been thinking about calling for a while. He said he knew Vernon probably didn't want to hear from him. He said he just wanted to talk, maybe explain, maybe apologize. He said he'd lost everything, the bakeries, the money. His wife had left him 3 months ago. He was living in a rental apartment on the other side of town. He said he knew he'd made mistakes. He didn't say which ones. He didn't mention the word confused. But Vernon remembered. Vernon listened. He didn't interrupt. He let Ray Dean talk until he ran out of words. Then there was silence on the line. Ray Dean waiting for something. Forgiveness. Anger. Anything. Vernon hung up. He didn't slam the phone. He didn't say a word. He just pressed the button and set the phone down on the armrest of his chair. The next morning, Vernon drove to the cemetery outside of town. He parked in the same spot he always parked. He walked the familiar path between the headstones until he reached the one he knew by heart. Darlene May Skaggs, beloved wife, 1951 to 2019. Vernon stood there for a while. The morning was quiet. A few birds, a light breeze through the oak trees along the fence. He told her about the scholarship, about Tamara, about Celia passing her exam. He told her the money was doing some good now, helping people who needed it, people like them when they were young. Then he told her it was done. All of it. The bakery. Ray Dean. The anger. Done. He stood there a little longer. Then he walked back to his truck and drove home.